Sup, dude?
How's it going, comrades?
Another day in paradise that is the United States, right? 2020, late
Great
stage
country.
capitalism.
We're also proud to be Americans lately.
The flowers are blooming. No, actually, it's been rainy here for most of the last 10 days, and that's the ever existing cloud of capitalism. But anyway, again with that crappy intro. What's up, everybody?
Yeah, we're really on point today with our comedy. Anyway, yeah, welcome to the stream, everyone. If you're new to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button so the stream gets promoted in the algorithm as well. Obviously, we're up against that algorithm. It's quite a dragon to slay, but we're doing our best.
Dude, I noticed it for the first time really bad with the on stream. I was like, oh, this is the algorithm fucking with us. But
yeah, dude.
Anyway.
Oh, yeah. Oh, they do not like certain things. That's for sure. Obviously, wanted to give a big shout out to our patrons, as we do at the beginning and end of every live stream. These are the fine comrades supporting us on patreon.com/the Vanguard channel. That link is in the description if you want to join our community. We got a lot of cool stuff coming up. We've recently kind of rolled out our latest benefit for our Vanguardian level patrons, which is that they can call into our show once a month at their convenience.
Sort of radio show style.
Yeah, exactly. If you have a comment you want to make or a criticism of our opinions or just anything you want to say, that's the way to do it. Also, you can unlock our Discord by becoming a patron of any level, get access to our best interviews ever, or early access, that is. A lot of cool stuff. You'll want to check it out. That link's in the description. There's also a PayPal link. If you so desire to give us a donation, that'd be awesome. We're about to hit the road. It's going to break the fucking bank. But yeah, anyway, we got a lot of good shit for you guys today. Got a lot of cool stuff. I added a few more emojis, by the way, in the membership chat section, by the way. So if you're a member, now you have a Guy Fawkes emoji that you can throw up there. So fun times. Again, you can join and become a member as well. Another good way to support the show. But yeah, we got a lot of good stuff to go over today. We have two awesome guests that will also be joining us. I'll keep a surprise as to who they are, but keep watching. And later in about half an hour or so, we're going to be adding a couple guests to the stream that we're super excited to chat with too. I guess it's actually not a fucking I literally think I put it in the title.
You did put it in the title, so I was like, well, it's a surprise for anybody that has terrible eyesight, maybe, and really isn't paying attention.
Yeah. But so you guys know what's up. But it's gonna be a good conversation. Trust me. You're gonna want to hear it. These guys are way fucking smarter than me.
And me.
You know,
so
and,
yeah.
And
Gavin and I, we're not even going to be shy about it. The kind of stuff that Gavin and I scratch our head at and we're like, can you dumb this down and explain it to me again? That's the kind of stuff that these guys consume daily. So we're excited to have them do that dumbing down for all of us.
These are like PhD type.
PhD candidates. So we're excited for that conversation. Before we plow on to some of the drama content of the day and also just the bigger news stories, one thing I wanted to kick this off was with just more of a shout out and an update than anything for people who have been paying attention, and those of you who haven't, I hope you will start. The Steve Donziger trial just came to a close. Steve Donziger, as a lawyer that's basically, or I guess he's a former lawyer now, that they basically debarred him and ruined his career as a result of his fight for the Ecuadorian people and the indigenous Amazonian people in Ecuador who have been basically have had their entire land that they've lived on for who knows how fucking long destroyed by a oil company conglomerate Chevron. They lied to the people. They told them that it was milk, that it was giving their people nourishment. I mean, the most disgusting, depraved things, all that save money. And now obviously the children there are being born with all kinds of birth defects. There's all kinds of health concerns for the elderly, not to mention their entire ecosystem has collapsed because of the pollution. And there was originally a $13 billion settlement that was ruled in favor of the indigenous people in Ecuador that Chevron was ruled to have to pay. They got it negotiated down to $9 billion, and now they're currently that was upheld in Ecuador, and now they're fighting it domestically in the United States as a result. Donziger has spent over 650 days under house arrest, and now as his fate is being decided, it's going to be done by one judge, Judge Preska, with no jury. So this man has been held under house arrest for 650 days. He's about to finally have his day in court, a fucking charade. And now it's as if we're operating under some feudal system where one person, Judge Preska, can decide to put this man in a cage for the next 6 months at the whim of Chevron, an international super conglomerate that has poisoned the people of Ecuador.
Yeah, and if you've been following Steve Donziger on Twitter or on line at all, you'll know that Judge Preska has not exactly been a fair or neutral arbiter of this case. In fact, she's apparently just been reading the newspaper throughout the majority of the hearings or whatever you want to call this sham trial. So it's pretty much obvious what's going to happen. This is not any semblance of actual justice. Obviously, this whole entire episode is a complete disgrace. This is the kind of shit that radicalizes a motherfucker.
Yeah, and it's crazy because this is a guy, Steve Donziger. I don't know if it's Donziger or Donziger or whatever. There's a great interview that Chris Hedges did with him. You can check out our reaction to it, as well as you should watch the original video. It's really great. But this is the kind of dude that believes in the justice system. This dude's the kind of guy that dedicated his life to going through the fucking system, becoming an attorney, fighting the good fight. He's fought it for decades. 30 years he's been involved in this case, guys. And he's being fucked by what we realize is the ultimate power card, which is capital. It will, any kind of a justice system that you think we have is completely obsolete in the face of money. And that's why we see all of these rich fuckers get away with whatever they want to. All these powerful people get away with whatever they fuck they want to. And then poor people, particularly minorities, obviously we're familiar with the war on drugs and mass incarceration. They're targeted for petty crimes, etc. But this kind of shit is just a complete abuse of the justice system. And if you had any kind of faith in it at all, this would show you how hollow it is, because it's essentially our justice system. You can't call it a justice system. It's a non-justice system. It's an unjustice system. But this would completely poke any hole that you had in thinking that, I'm entitled to a jury of my peers deciding my fate because I'm an American. Like, no, you're not. And anybody that's been to fucking traffic court can tell you that. I remember one time I was in traffic court and I'm looking at the motherfucker that pulled me over, and I'm like, this guy did not have a speed gun get me. He just pulled me over because he knew I was speeding. And I'm in the room talking to the judge, and I'm like, he doesn't have any evidence that he pulled me over. And the cop literally says, I got him with my radar gun. He was going 10 miles an hour. And she was like, that's good enough for me. Guilty. That was literally what the fuck happened.
You can appeal those. And then all you have to say is, when was the last time you calibrated your speeding gun? And then half the time the dude won't even show up because he's too lazy to come.
The guy did show up, and then he just lied, and then I got the ticket anyway.
So you were the 50% of the cases where the guy did show up.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I was literally looking at the cop, and he lied. And the judge, I was like, he doesn't have any evidence that he used a radar gun. Like, where's the proof of that? We're standing right here. I'm innocent until proven guilty. Where's the proof? And the judge was like, you can't talk like that in court, son. Blah, blah, blah. This is the paperwork for diversion. And then I was like, fuck your paperwork for diversion. And then I got a bench warrant. And now 3 years later, I'm still fucking involved in this. But anyway, that's just my like weird tangent of showing, like, making this completely personal and narcissistic when we should be talking about Steve Donziger. I'm a piece of shit. But what I'm saying is that obviously at every level of this, it's completely fucked up. And it's important to follow this case, and this is just another example of our completely corrupt and broken justice system anyway.
Indeed, yeah, and like we said, we were going to keep you guys updated on the story, and we'll let you know tomorrow or whenever the fuck we're live next about the next update in the story. But yeah, we're super. What are you laughing at, bro?
Oh, just somebody in the comment section.
Okay.
Derp Diggler, sometimes you have good jokes. I'm going to be honest. Donziger, he put a comment at Donziger should have hired Vaush as his attorney, and I laughed really hard.
That's actually pretty funny. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Gavin never drives. I drive Gavin everywhere. I drive Gavin everywhere we've ever been.
I can drive, though.
No, I know, I'm just saying I do drive. I do the driving. But anyway,
fair enough.
But anyway, I'm just kidding. We're gonna both drive the van. We're both co-pilots in the van. If the van gets fucked, we're both gonna cry. So it's like,
yeah, exactly. And yeah, I finally did add a sticker for myself. I know it doesn't show up when I put it on screen, but I finally added a sticker for myself. I know it looks kind of dumb, but I cannot get a good photo of myself with this shit in the background.
We all look dumb in this. It's like we're not in it for vanity.
No, obviously not. Anyway, we did want to get into one big story before we invite on our special guest for the day, and that involves Mr. David Pakman, or as I like to call him, David Pakman. But yeah, dude, he's probably one of my least favorite on this scene, and he's really just probably more indicative than any other bread tuber of the grift towards the center, the let's capitalize on the deep pocketed Lincoln Project types that want to hear about Trump all day. Even, 6 months after he's gone, Trump is going to come back and Trump press conference. Like, dude, you're the only one still giving this dude oxygen. You're literally doing what got him elected in the first place, covering him nonstop and acting like he's a bigger threat than he actually is. That's the state of the David Pakman show. That's all he talks about.
Yeah,
all
it's
day
the
long.
Voxification of BreadTube.
The what?
The Voxification of BreadTube.
Oh, yeah.
Like
I thought you said Vaush-ification.
Oh, no, sorry. The VOX, the Ezra Klein, Matt Iglesias upstart that neither of them work at anymore because it's owned by a conglomerate.
And it's what's happening to The Intercept too. And like I said, it's really the whole David Pakman school of thought is really not a school of thought. It's really more of a business model. It's really realizing which demographics, again, are the most deep pocketed. And that's those kind of PMC suburban types that are terrified of Trump and love anti-Trump content. And that's not to say this guy is, like wrong about everything. He certainly is probably more reasonable than your average, Republican, for example. But I do think that's pretty undeniable what's going on. And as someone who's been observing his trajectory for years, I just think it can't be denied. And what makes this next story interesting is that David Pakman is one of the dudes that Vaush has kind of groveled for the approval of in the past, trying to get Pakman's approval, trying to kind of get in on that lane. Maybe signaling that in the future he'll go down that path himself, which I've always kind of been on the lookout for. But again, hopefully this episode can reveal to Vaush who his true allies are. It's not these nutless neoliberal sellouts and shills like David Pakman. It's actual leftists. It's actual, anti-establishment voices that are unafraid to challenge power when it's inconvenient, when it's a little bit uncomfortable. And I think that's really best illustrated by this whole situation, which of course has been unfolding over the last week, and Pakman's response to it. When most of the rest of the left has been fairly unified behind Palestine, Pakman has been one of the few to buck that trend, and quite embarrassingly so. I'll say myself. We can get into these clips, but did you have anything you wanted to add, Zach?
Yeah, well, I think obviously, one, I see everybody knows that David Pakman was fucking hustling for 1 million subs on YouTube. So, anytime you're going to play that game, you're going to have to make compromises in your shit. I think it's obvious, right? Anybody that is completely unafraid to say whatever they want has never been able to get 1 million subs on YouTube. It's never been done. People have been around way longer. Pac-Man shit gets plugged by the algorithm way harder than anybody else's on the left does. I mean, even harder than Sam Cedar sometimes, I feel like. I don't know if I get suggested that shit all the time and I never fucking click on it. So I mean, I don't know how the algorithm works. We all will just speculate, but I don't get suggested other like fucking loudmouth lefties like us ever. No. You know what I mean? It's always The Hill or David Pakman or Sam Cedar or something. But I wasn't surprised to see this. I mean, maybe I was, but if anybody was going to give a terrible take, I expected it to be somebody like David Pakman or Sam Cedar or somebody that's in that neoliberal lane, as opposed to somebody, even like Vaush. And this is where I will give Vaush credit, right? Because obviously I don't think I've ever said anything particularly nice about Vaush on this podcast. Here I will. You tweeted about it actually from the Vanguard account. He did that very, very successful fundraiser for Palestinians, which is what's the catalyst for what we're going to be talking about. He raised something like $40,000, almost $50,000, something crazy. I think you're muted a little bit right now, Gavin.
Yeah, he raised way more than that.
Oh, okay.
Here, let me put it on screen real quick. Yeah.
Holy shit. Yeah. Okay. That's way more than I fucking thought. So see, that is 27 hours of uninterrupted live streaming. So this was fucking crazy. Yeah. When I didn't even realize that he was doing this constantly, because I remember I checked a while ago and it was like he'd raised like $50,000 or something like that. He kept fucking going. This is insane, guys. The amount of good that this money is going to do is astronomical. We always talk about how bread tubers should use their platforms to do crazy things that are really important. This is an example of Vaush doing that. I think that, yeah. And he said that he was going to cover the difference of $6,215.61 and put up a receipt because he's Vaush, And I just think that you got to respect this, and you got to call out good work when you see it on the left. And and this does remind everybody that even though we infight and we argue, and Vaush is a debater and he's concerned about strategy, and we'll critique Vaush's strategy, and I hope someday he makes a video about us and invites us on his show so that we can debate each other. But this was an example of, again, you said the left harmoniously agreeing on something rare. It was a good cause for us all to rally behind. Let's hope that we can start to do that more often by issue basis, because here's what I think is going to be helpful for the left moving forward is I don't have any problem working on a project with Vaush in solidarity, even though we radically disagree on so much shit. And I'm sure he would have a bunch of nasty shit to say about the Vanguard if he spent even a little bit of time watching our content. So, but we would stand in solidarity and work for something like Palestine, like getting people Medicare for all, like organizing a worker strike, because any kind of beef we have is really just semantics and strategy disagreements. Why would we jeopardize moving the ball forward because of that, right? And so anyway, I just wanted to say that I thought that was amazing that he did that. A 27-hour stream is no fucking joke.
No, straight up, all the props in the world to Vaush. Hats off to the dude. That's literally the best possible way to use your platform of that magnitude when you do have that large of a following or an audience or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, undeniable props. And
tapping into people who want to help but don't know what the fuck to do.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously we criticize people a lot around the time that, people were talking about force the vote. We criticize them for putting personality and stuff like that above substance. And that's the last thing we ever want to do. We're always going to put substance above personality, despite the fact that we comment a lot on like personalities and different people beefing and stuff like that. We're always going to give you guys an objective analysis of what we think is the right strategy or the wrong strategy, or where we fall on something. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people, I don't know about Vaush necessarily, but I certainly have my own opinions. I do think a lot of people put personality ahead of policy and ahead of substance in the force the vote moment, which of course had a lot to do with the extremely controversial nature of Jimmy Dore. But, Vaush is a controversial guy too, depending on who you ask. Depending on who you ask, a lot of people think a lot of things about the guy. And it's very easy to just be like, I don't want to be associated with this guy, so I'm not going to give him credit for anything. Absolutely not. When you do something that's worth credit, you're going to get credit for doing it. And this is undeniably an amazing use of his platform. And I genuinely do think that it's worth shouting out and saying, even as people that are pretty frequent and virulent critics of the guy and his philosophy at times, this is absolutely, undeniably a good use of time and money, which is why it's so funny that David Pakman couldn't meet that very, very low bar. Again, giving credit for raising hundreds of thousands of dollars for a children's relief fund in a terrorized country. Before we get into this specifically, I wanted to play this brief clip from when Pakman popped up on Destiny's stream. Speaking of, anyway, but just to get a little bit of an idea of what he does think of is the correct solution to the Israel-Palestine situation. So this might give some good context before we get into his response to Vaush's live stream, which is the main meat of this.
Okay, so no hot takes for the. What do you think? What do you think the solution is?
Eventually, like big picture.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious what you feel.
I've been an advocate for a two-state solution for a long time, which will never happen for as long as the two sides are Netanyahu and a split Palestinian Hamas plus Palestinian Authority. Mm-hmm. I just don't think that will ever lead to a sensible outcome.
Just when you say two-state solution, like what does that imply in terms of like government structure and everything? Or are there different like thoughts on how this works?
Well, I mean, it's going to be one Palestinian government. Mm-hmm. You have to make the territories contiguous in some way, closely aligned to the 1967 borders. Mm-hmm. The one Palestinian government can't be Hamas. I mean, there's no possible way that that's going to be the case.
Of course.
And it'd be one government and sort of with the 67 borders as the framework.
67 framework. So after the fucking after they'd already had their way with Palestine, let's give Israel what they want and fuck Palestine, and also we get to decide what their government's going to be like.
Yeah, and of course the obvious solution is to defund the state of Israel until the shit gets figured out, and to broker actual peace and try to form a unifying government between the Israeli people and the Palestinian people. Any other solution is basically an endorsement of the status quo as it has existed for years and years and decades now. This further and further encroachment. Again, a two-state solution is just kicking the can down the road and saying, oh, let's things go back to how they've been for the last 10 or 20 or whatever years, while both sides apparently work on a peace deal, which is obviously not happening. That's just not
Trump
happening.
was brokering a peace deal. Like, go fuck yourself, right? And just to echo what you were saying, the only sensible solution is to say, hey, there's a region, people want to live there. Let's create a democratic state. Everybody is one person. They get one vote. And we let the motherfuckers that live there decide what they're going to do. And the people will rule.
Yeah, exactly. And as Rania Kalik recently pointed out, if you think it's like the Palestinian people and the Israeli people they can never live together, if you think that's just totally irreconcilable, that they have to be separate forever, as she pointed out, people said the same thing about blacks and whites during integration or right before. They said, are you kidding me? These two races will never be able to coexist peacefully. That's insanity to even suggest. And of course, that was used to kind of stomp down the idea of actually integrating the races in America for years. The same thing is currently being done. And again, to even promote this notion that a two-state solution is what we should be working towards is essentially a ruse.
And that it's Hamas that's keeping the two states, that everything would be fine if it wasn't for Hamas. And okay, Netanyahu's pretty bad, but really it's Hamas. That's what he was saying in that fucking clip.
Exactly. And that's a good segue into the next part of this discussion, which is, of course, his response to the one truly commendable thing that Vaush has done in recent memory. Of course, that fundraiser we were just talking about. And this was Pakman's response when asked by a caller on his show. Let's take a look.
Can you do a shout out to Vaush's charity stream and Twitch raid? He's raised money for Palestine Children's Relief Fund. Hold on a second. That rings a bell to me.
He's literally looking at the Wikipedia, by the way. I looked on the Wikipedia. He's literally reads verbatim right off it.
Let me look that up. Yeah, Palestine Children's Relief Fund has been criticized due to its financial affiliation with the Holy Land Foundation, which was shut down for suspected funneling of donations to terrorist organizations. So no, that's not something I'm going to get involved in. That's not a good connection.
Hey, dude, you know who you fucking promoted and propped up over and over again? Fucking Hillary Clinton, the #1 recipient of AIPAC money ever. You know what I'm saying? Is that a good connection? Do you feel okay promoting people that are funded to the tune of millions and billions of dollars by AIPAC, which is undeniably a terrorist entity? Like, the Israeli government is that's what it is. Let's keep it real.
Let's look at our own fucking government. Our own president is featured right here. Let's talk about a terrorist group, right? Yeah. I'll volunteer to the United States of America as a great example of a terrorist leader, Joseph Biden. I forgot his fucking first name for a second. I'm sorry, but are you kidding me? How are you going to say that? We are literally we're still going to sell arms to Saudi Arabia. We are still going to sell arms to Israel. We are still going to do all of the things that we're doing in the Middle East with private contractors. We are still going to kill children. We are still going to be responsible for the bombing of homes, personally and indirectly. So all of these things that he's trying to label at, I'll be like, oh, we can't give these, Palestinian people any of our money. That could go to an organization that's been, tied to terrorism. We already know that anything that any Palestinian does to try and liberate themselves is considered terrorist. People will tell you that BDS is economic terrorism against Israel. That is the situation. So are Gavin and I sitting here endorsing suicide bombing? No. But what we're doing is saying that the obvious thing that somebody like David Pakman is, I'm using too many pronouns to keep this straight. What somebody like David Pakman is doing is they're, one, not being serious about the crimes that the United States commits at all times. And two, they're being completely disingenuous about their sourcing and the way they're portraying the issue. And he's being extremely reductive and straw man. And notice how he didn't even engage with it. He literally read, like you said, verbatim from a Wikipedia page. So
yeah, a Wikipedia page that, by the way, could be edited by APAC, for example. Let's be honest here. Let's not act like they don't have a pretty slick online operation, which is trying to influence public opinion on to their side. That's a very obvious statement. It's happening. So just immediately going to a Wikipedia article without doing a modicum of fucking research, and then turning around and accusing Vaush, again, someone who's groveled for your approval and literally been on your show, because saying, "Oh, you're funding terrorists, bro." You would have called the Black Panther Party terrorists. There's no doubt in my fucking mind that you would have done that shit. That you would have been right along with those motherfuckers, characterizing the Black Panthers as terrorists. Of course, when you have a oppressed fucking class of people that's experiencing apartheid, that's experiencing subjugation, of course there's going to be radical factions that bubble up. What do you fucking? That's not representative of the fucking guy. And do you think? Yeah, it's just so disgraceful.
And he doesn't even bring up the fact that there's a massive disparity in a power imbalance. This is the same kind of guy who, in so many other instances, will apply this very clear logic that it's like, oh, well, there's a massive power imbalance here. So I imagine that even if you took a really simple issue to David Pakman and you were like, let's make this about something that's completely unrelated to Israel-Palestine. Let's talk about anti-black racism versus anti-white racism. You understand how those things are different. Like, yeah, it's not impossible for a black person to hate white people. However, the structural
the balance of oppression
balance of oppression in the structural system that we have that imposes those limitations on people due to the anti-black and pro-white racism that is built into the American institution. Those things are different. We talk about power imbalances in those ways, and somebody like David Pakman is really able to grasp that, yet he will not apply that same logic to a different situation like Israel-Palestine, where, again, you have a United States-funded military with infinite resources compared to and it's not even broad Hamas, right? It's the Hamas rebels that are...
It's literally like comparing the evil empire in Star Wars to the rebel faction and being like, oh, Luke Skywalker is the terrorist.
And exactly. And it's like, of course, war is bad, and we don't support war. And I know that there have been people that have been killed on both sides of that, and that is wrong. But the reason that this is happening is something that people like David Pakman refuse to address, and they want to steamroll over it and act like, oh, these people are just crazy and they won't stop attacking Israel and they're terrorists. It's like, what are you talking about?
No context. Yeah, it's not like, oh, this is due to these conditions of brutal occupation and apartheid. Therefore, these people are resisting, and sometimes it gets violent. Obviously, it's going to get violent under these conditions. That kind of context is never given. It's always like, oh, there's this peaceful and sovereign state of Israel, and then there's all these like fucking crazy barbarians at the border throwing bombs and throwing rocks and like just causing a ruckus for no, like, why are these people upset? What's their issue? Why are they committing these acts? What's going on? Like, I wonder why. Maybe we could
China comes to New York City and says this is Shanghai now. It's going to get fucking violent.
Yeah. It's so crazy, the just kind of willful ignorance on this, and again, just a refusal to wade into any waters which could be uncomfortable or awkward for you and your, again, demographic of kind of PMC suburban liberals who want to hear about Trump 24/7. Yeah, I know it's a little bit uncomfortable to talk about this in accurate terms. But that's why we're on the fucking left. That's why we're that's why we have these positions. That's why we have these values, is to call out the powerful and to stand with the oppressed. It should be very simple, but apparently it's not for a lot of these people. So, something to keep in mind going forward. I think this is as good a litmus test as any. I've said that a few times. And to me, it's just so goddamn obvious. But like I said, apparently that's a low bar that some people are not able to clear.
Yeah, and I think that it's been really telling who that is, whether that's Yang, Marianne, or David Pakman. So
yeah.
Like I said, we'll call a spade here at the Vanguard. So anyway, I guess 100%. That's the end of that story.
Yeah, it is. And it looks like our guests have shown up for the stream too. We're super excited to welcome on Matt and Victor. They're from the Plastic Pills and the corresponding Pill Pod, which is an awesome channel, or two channels rather, on YouTube. The Plastic Pills is a channel featuring critical theory and philosophical analyses of pop culture. Other times it's exposition. And they also have a podcast called the PillPod that can be found on YouTube, that can be found on Spotify, and several other places as well. But we're super excited to talk with Matt and Victor. Without further ado, Will, welcome to the stream. What's up, guys?
Hey, how's it going?
How you guys doing? Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. Great chatting with you.
Absolutely. Do you just want to just take a moment or two to introduce yourself to our audience and maybe talk a little bit about the project you guys collaborate on?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Victor. I'm going into fifth year, I guess, PhD student at the University of Toronto. I do political theory, and I'm like obviously interested in leftist politics. And I kind of met these guys when I was doing my master's, Matt, and then there's two other members of the PillPod who we're all basically like either have our PhDs or are PhD students. I think like Matt has his PhD. I'm still working on mine. And it was one of the guys. Yeah. Sorry, you guys got bachelors?
No, I know. He was making a joke.
Okay. Yeah. And and then Pills, the main guy, kind of just like started this YouTube channel where he was doing these expositional theory videos. So and then he invited us to make like kind of a spin-off podcast and just cover a lot of philosophical issues and political issues. And Matt and I are kind of more the political ones. The other two guys are more into like the philosophy and metaphysics stuff. But sure. Yeah, I'll let Matt introduce himself too.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot for having both of us on. Actually, Victor, I remember the day we met, I heard you were bashing Trump a few seconds ago, was actually at my apartment because we all decided we were going to gather together, have some drinks, watch the American election, and just everybody had an opinion about how they were going to shit on Hillary Clinton, being like, we got to push her to the left as soon as she's president. And then just as the night went, things sank and sank and sank. And I remember Brazzoni came up to me and was like, do you think that Trump might actually win? And I was like, well, I got a bottle of whiskey prepared one way or another, so I'm ready.
Dude, I remember that night. I had the same kind of reaction.
That was grim.
It was grim.
We were all prepared for Hillary winning, which was not ideal for anyone. I mean, at least I don't think so. I'm not speaking for anyone here, but definitely not for me. But then I don't think anyone truly was just ready, like emotionally or anything, for the Trump victory, which obviously happened. And that was that was a crazy night. I remember it vividly, though.
Yeah, that was something. I had a public speaking class that night. It was my first semester of college when Trump won that night, and I was at a public speaking class, and nobody was doing anything that night except watching in horror. Because it was like a late night class. It was like, I think it didn't get out until like 10 or something, but we were all just watching just in terror, and nobody was doing any public speaking. But yeah, that was just quite an evening.
Well, it's funny because my buddy David Hollins was the first person in my little social group, our fucking bubble, who told me, Trump might actually win, right? Because I think it was the moment when, he lashed out at John McCain, calling him a coward. And, Trump was a draft dodger, fucking daddy's boy, had never really done anything in his entire goddamn life. And John McCain, war criminal that he was actually a pretty brave guy. He was tortured. He stood up for his country. He really believed in what he said. And Dave told me, there he's attacking him, and his support is not fucking disappearing. Like, he's rock solid. So he could actually win. And everybody I know, including myself, full disclosure, was like, no. Fucking and then we all ate our words that night. But anyway, so I'm also part of the Plastic Pills podcast with Brazzoni. I actually got in on it because I knew all these guys from way back in the day. We did our PhD together. I was teaching at a university in Mexico at the time. Then COVID hit. I came back to Canada, and I was incredibly bored just because, like all of us, we were locked down. Yeah. So Dylan, Plastic Pills, fuck. Victor knows that. It's funny. Said you should be part of this podcast with me and the guys. And I was like, I'm not doing anything. And yeah, now it's a thing we do every week, and it's a lot of fun. And we get into some spicy topics sometime, as Brazzoni was saying. We tend to be a little more political. They tend to be a little more philosophical. So sometimes we bash heads, but
well, speaking of
where the
politics,
fireworks come from.
Speaking of politics, just before we get really more into the theory stuff or into the PillPod at all more, I wanted to just get your reaction to this because it's just an interesting question that I'm always kind of thinking about the correct way to approach. And obviously, you brought it to my mind by mentioning the Hillary-Trump election, and I voted for Jill Stein in that election. Hillary obviously took more money from AIPAC than any of the other candidates, and obviously Biden did too. Obviously, I would never ever vote for a Republican, let alone Trump. But I'm also do take the moral stance that I just can't participate in, voting for candidates that are that level of corrupt, that have that much blood on their hands, etc. Well, what's your guys thinking on that question? Do you think it's worth biting the bullet and voting for Democrats like Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden that are gonna, continue the status quo in Palestine and yada yada yada? Or like, what's your best view of resistance to that kind of neoliberalism?
Well, don't you hear? The Republicans are the party of unions now. Josh Hawley and Marco Rubio, they're fucking shitting all over those big companies. You can go first, Prasad. I just had to get that
I think it's a tough question. Like, I think I probably tend to be a little bit more like, look at any ground that you can take and take that ground that you can for leftist causes. In fact, I'm reminded that I think the first time I ever interacted with you guys, I think you had like Epoch Philosophy on way back at the beginning. And I think I commented in the chat about Andrew Yang. And I remember there's like a bit of it. And I know obviously Andrew Yang has been like really shit lately with his comments about Israel and stuff like that, clearly. But I think I think one of the reasons like he appealed to me at the time was because, and I think part of this comes from me like studying academic political science and political theory, like especially in the political science side and public policy, you study like sort of like when are the opportunities for change? Like a lot of like academic political science is trying to explain how do institutional and political changes occur? What are like the opportunities? And you guys have probably heard the term, the Overton window, like in terms of like a policy opportunity. I think like the reason I thought one of the things that attracted me to Yang initially at the time was it seemed like there was a lot of people on the right who were attracted to him. And I thought that it seemed like there was potentially an opportunity to like affirmatively gain some ground. And then like, let's just say hypothetically that, there was a universal basic income that would like put people in a position to be able to resist and push for more left-wing things.
And you called yourself a post-partisan leftist, right? So that would kind of fit it right into that.
Yeah. And like, I think, what I mean by that is sometimes I think we get a little bit too fixated on like the political label, like almost, we get a little bit emotionally attached to like this label of socialism. And then, but like, we forget like what I think the left is supposed to be about, which are, I want to be like outcome focused, meaning I like why are we supporting something? Like, what's the outcome we want? And, I was thinking about something you guys were covering too, the Destiny Richard Wolff debate, right? I did watch that for fun.
Yeah.
And
that was the most weird thing I'd ever heard of in my entire life. I literally woke up and I'm like, is it fucking like 2006 and I'm high again?
But yeah, so I mean, what I found so frustrating about that debate was like there's this fixation on like what does the term socialism mean? And I think what would have potentially been interesting would have been to say, what is the outcome that you both want? Like,
well,
what are you after?
You know why that happened? Because Destiny doesn't actually like to defend the merits of what he believes. He just likes to try to pin people into a bullshit semantic argument. Like 5 minutes as soon as he loses, as soon as he realizes that the gig is up, then he'll literally just turn to that. Like, I'm going to try to back you into the semantic corner, and that's where we're going to stay for the next 2.5 hours, if that's what it takes. I cannot stand that way the guy debates. I think he's the most weaselly, disingenuous fucker in the entire left. I thought Richard Wolff won that debate. A lot of people were like, he didn't. Their styles were definitely incongruous. I think that's one thing that no one can deny.
Yeah, well, that's 100% true. I want to say though, just on Victor's point, I'm also a pretty outcome-focused guy, and this is why I had some tough choices during the American election, right? So I'm Canadian. I can't actually vote, but I teach at an American university, very involved in American politics. I spent the last 5 years doing nothing but dunking on Trump, talking about postmodern conservatism, as I call it, all that stuff. And I was a Bernie Sanders supporter. I am a Bernie Sanders supporter, right? I think that democratic socialism is the way to go. We can talk about what that means, because as Victor pointed out, it means a lot of things to different people. So when,
including
everything that happened. Sorry?
Including to Bernie Sanders himself?
Oh, yeah, 100%, right? It's changed a lot over time. But, around the time when, he lost and Biden was clearly going to be the Democratic candidate, I released a piece with my friend Ben Burgess and a few others saying we should get behind Biden. And we took a lot of flack for that. We expected it. And the argument was, look, Biden is a shit candidate. There's no doubt about it. He's bad in a lot of things. He's especially bad when it comes to foreign policy, as you guys pointed out. But, we do have an opportunity here to trade something that's bad for something that's awful. And I think Noam Chomsky put it really well around this time, where he said, look, real politics isn't exhausted by voting for one guy or another, which is the mistake a lot of people who just put their faith in representative democracy make. Real politics continues after the election, where you start trying to do everything that you can to move the Democratic Party left. And if it's not going to go left, you do everything you can to build up those institutions so down the line, it will move left, whether they want it to or not. So that's the kind of tag that I took.
Yeah, and I feel a lot. I feel where you guys are coming from on a lot of those issues, and I'll put my cards on the table too. I did vote for Joe Biden. Gavin and I had a lot of good conversations about that on the podcast before it happened, and I essentially boiled down my position at the time to something that was what you guys had said. I was looking at the narrow margins and seeing, okay, what could I possibly tell myself that I'm going to get if I do vote for Joe Biden, and a lot of those things haven't come to fruition. Right. He hasn't gotten back in the Iran deal. He has been increasingly hawkish. $2,000 checks, the whole list of things that, you could talk about that he didn't do. But what I'm mostly concerned with, and something that I'd like to kind of ask as a follow up, is I'm more reluctant now to get behind supporting a Democrat in the next election cycle, whether I'll vote for a Democrat if they're good as a congressional candidate. I'm not above that, but I just don't imagine a solid Democratic candidate being put up in 2024 now. And I'm wondering, what do you guys think about that? How do if Joe Biden is true to his word, which God knows we can never fucking trust him to be, that he is going to seek a second term, where does that put the left now, when we just are really at a turning point where we don't quite have the time to wait another 4 years, potentially 8 years, for somebody like Joe Biden to just keep spinning his wheels if we're not going to go with a third party in 2024?
I mean, the problem, I feel like, is in some ways much grimmer than that, in the sense that one of the problems, and I think, we're all Canadian on the PillPod, and I think one of the things that I always feel like is an elephant in the room that isn't talked about that much by the left is just the institutional structure of American politics is such a huge barrier. Even if Bernie Sanders became president, you got to get the House of Representatives, you got to get the Senate, and you got to get past any sort of constitutional challenges. The advantage, in Canada, we have a parliamentary system. So whoever wins the most seats just gets to do whatever they want, right? They actually get to push their legislative agenda. And then the public gets to see if they liked what that person actually got to accomplish. In the US, it's nothing gets done. And then everybody gets to blame the other side for nothing getting done. And I feel like there needs to be more discussion about how to overcome that. So until somehow there's some plan to overcome, how are these things actually going to change? I feel like it doesn't matter. I think sometimes there's a bit of a fantasy on the American left that if Bernie Sanders would have won, it would have been amazing, but he would have had to overcome all those barriers, so I don't know how different it actually would have even been possible for it to be.
Well, my response to that would be that there's a lot of things that an executive just can do. For example, taking cannabis off of the Schedule 1 and essentially legalizing it on a federal level. That's something that the entire Democratic Party was on board with, even Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, etc. Joe Biden unilaterally decided to take that off of the Democratic Party platform, essentially continuing the drug war, continuing the war on cannabis. So that's an instance where Bernie versus Biden.
Student debt.
Same thing with student debt. Yeah, that's an instance where Bernie versus Biden in the White House is a night and day worth of difference. That's freeing the nonviolent drug offenders, something that Bernie Sanders promised to do,
and even foreign policy.
And even when we talk about, because this is an issue I like to talk about for obvious reasons, but, when it comes to legalization, when it does happen, which it is inevitable, I would much rather have someone like Bernie in the White House when it does than Biden, because Biden's is going to give the farm away to corporate America. He's going to give the farm away to Marlboro and Big Pharma. And all of these companies that want to profit off of cannabis. Bernie promised that he was going to make sure that the communities that were most affected by the war on drugs would kind of be have the first seat at the table in that regard, that, he would give more incentives to smaller businesses in that regard. So I just think there's so many differences on an executive level that we would see. And also just, the posture, posturing yourself against the health insurance industry instead of, being their number one recipient of donation money and then doing these bullshit COBRA subsidies, which is just a giant handout to the health insurance industry, instead of actually, fighting for people's, health insurance. Just, so many things like that where I think that there would be a world of difference. Although I do agree the nature of our system would make it very difficult to pass some of his more truly sweeping, truly foundational proposals like Medicare for All, like abolishing the health insurance industry outright. That would definitely be a battle. I'm not denying that. But then again, I think it's worth having someone that's willing to wage that battle in the first place, rather than just, become instantly an ally, a puppet to these corporations instead of even trying to oppose yourself to them. And I think foreign policy is another instance, with what's going on in Israel, Palestine right now. I think Biden's approach has just been fucking disgusting. And that's a story we can get into, because I want to talk about, what were you saying?
I was just gonna say, like, I mean, of course, I agree with all that, but I was thinking about it more from the perspective of like, sustained structural change. Like that's just not gonna happen until like there's a correction to like the way the system functions, like electorally, the institutions.
I wanted to say something quickly because I actually tend to agree with you, Gavin. I also agree with Victor that getting Bernie into the White House would not have been enough to actually fix Americans' problems. It wouldn't even be enough to even engage in modest institutional reform to fix the United States' problems, let alone the world's problems. But I do think there'd be a lot of symbolic value in getting somebody like Bernie into office. And I don't think that's to be trivialized, because one of the things that I think was interesting about him labeling himself a democratic socialist and getting reasonably close to a shot at real power was it showed that there is the possibility of building a viable radical left in the United States that most of us 20 years ago would say never going to happen, right? Like you're more likely to fucking see, dinosaurs come back crawling from the earth than you are to see like a real left emerge in the US. That's now something that's really on the table. And I think that what we need to do is see this less as a defeat, so much as an opportunity to, as Thomas Beck would say, fail, but fail better next time, right? We need to build institutions like the Democratic Socialists of America in the USA. We need to build institutions like Courage in the NDP party in Canada. We need to learn from examples in the past where people have built successful left-wing parties from the ground up, allying with other progressive forces and been victorious. And I think there are a lot of good paradigms that we can look to there, particularly in the United Kingdom, where Labour went from being basically a non-existent party to being in charge of the country for a lot of the latter half of the 20th century. All these things are valuable lessons that we can draw upon. And I think sometimes there can be a tendency on the part of the left for us to think that our cause is so right, that's just obvious that we need to win. And I think it is obvious that we need to win, but what happens is when we lose, we get really disappointed and we think it's never going to happen, right? We need to kind of realize that loss isn't just a failure. It's an opportunity to learn. And I think we've learned a lot over this last election, and I'm hoping that we're going to channel those into bigger wins in the future.
I totally agree with that. And that's actually the exact line of logic which I use when people try to hit me with this bullshit, which is that they're post-partisan and that there's no point in even engaging electoral politics at all. Obviously, Bernie Sanders is the reason why there's a left in this country. There is this is the reason there's an independent media sphere. This is the reason why there's a robust DSA, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If we just let, if another future opportunity in the same vein escape us, that would be detrimental, if not suicidal, to any sort of sustainable left movement going forward. We're going to need more people getting involved, and that's created by, the excitement, or whatever you want to call it, of an electoral campaign. I mean, that's why I became a socialist in 2015 because of Bernie Sanders. Before that, I didn't think there was any possibility of there being an actual sustainable movement, like you said. So I think that's undeniable. And again, I really do take issue with people that are like, they're so defeated by what happened to Bernie Sanders that they're like, it just, like set up a fucking, soup kitchen shop and forget electoral politics. We can do both. I'm 100% for mutual aid, but that doesn't mean we can't pursue another kind of movement that, and even if it's like totally chaotic or quixotic or whatever the fuck the word is, like even if it's doomed to fail, I still think it's worth it, just to get people excited or interested or on board with these ideas. Again, like I did, what Bernie Sanders did to me. But yeah, I did want to get into this story real quick. Because I promised people via the headline we would talk about it, which is Rashida Tlaib actually confronting Joe Biden on the tarmac in Detroit to basically tell him that what he's doing is enabling the genocide of Palestinian people, and including potentially her own family members, which are living in the West Bank. So, the immediacy in the situation for Rashida is undeniable. She can't just be like, this is going on somewhere else in the world. I'll turn off my brain and pretend like, this isn't an empire and, whatever. This is hitting home very close to home for her because that's where her family lives. And indeed, she literally confronted Joe Biden, which I have to say is pretty fucking metal. I kind of wish we would see more of this from the squad members. Like, if I was there, I would confront the motherfucker. I'd be like, what's up with this shit? Why are you taking so much money from the health insurance industry? Why are you taking so much money from APAC, et cetera, et cetera? But credit where it's due. This is awesome. And the fact that she really was able to take him to task here, or at least try, I think is cool. What's unfortunate, though, was his response, and I'll play it. I thought this was personally just disgraceful. And this is, obviously, as he's continuing to fund Israel to the tune of, like billions of dollars.
Oh, don't worry, Gavin. He gave them a nice finger wagging.
Yeah. One sec. Let me find this, though. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, just to kind of add into that while we're looking for the clip, I guess are you guys just to get your guys' broad thoughts really quickly? Are you guys surprised at all by the posture that Biden's taking, considering how dramatically unpopular the strikes against Palestine have been?
No, I'm frankly not. I mean,
Yeah, neither am I.
Yeah, he's campaigned as a moderate, and quite frankly, the interventionist American foreign policy hasn't been popular since 2004, when Bush II, got into office and initiated the catastrophic war on terror that led hundreds of thousands to die, right? And what would happen, I imagine, in his brain, is that if he were to take a hard line against Israel, it would create a lot of foreign policy ripples around the globe that would disrupt the status quo and might actually require the United States, from his perspective, to intervene in areas of Middle East politics that he just doesn't want to get involved in, right? What's the easiest thing for him right now is just to stay the course, support Israel as a staunch ally, and not try to shake the pot too substantially. And I think that's absolutely the wrong approach to take, because it's allowing needless human suffering to perpetuate as it has for many, many decades right now. But quite frankly, what are you going to expect from a guy like Joe?
Well, he lays it out for us here.
Yeah, this is his response to Representative Tlaib.
I'm Rashid. Tlaib, where's Rashid? I tell you what, Rashid, I want to say to you that I admire your intellect, I admire your passion, and I admire your concern for so many other people. And it's from my heart, I pray that your grandmom and family are well. I promise you I'm going to do everything to see that they are on the West Bank. You're a fighter, and God, thank you for being a fighter.
So what's your reaction, guys?
Well, I'm not surprised you decided to take this tone. This is what won him the election, right? The minute I knew that Joe Biden was probably going to carry 2020 was actually during that first debate where he was talking about Hunter Biden. And he came across as compassionate, warm, kind of like that grandfather that, you sometimes take issue with because he says a few racist things every now and then, but he's generally a pretty amiable guy. And I just thought he came across looking a lot better than somebody like Donald Trump. And that's exactly the same kind of pose that he's taking here. Moderate, grandfatherly, sage. It's very much a posture that's been carefully constructed and conceived of by his supporters, and I'm sure by all the different aides out there. And
I almost prefer the honesty of Trump on this issue because their actions are the same. Their actions are the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is one of the big problems with the Democratic Party when it comes to foreign policy, right? Which is that they do almost exactly the same thing as the Republicans. They just happen to put a nice face on it. And it's like that meme going around, that's very popular shows. There's a picture of Republicans and they're just dropping bombs in the Middle East. And then there's a picture of Democrats. They're dropping bombs on the Middle East, but they have a gay pride and Black Lives Matter flag on it. Same difference in the end. But one of them just happens to have more platitudes to say about what's going on. And I am not quite with you, Gavin. I do think it is actually important that sometimes they gesture to try and be better, because sometimes if people gesture to try and be better, you can use that as a wedge to try to push them in that direction. But it's not really all that much.
I would argue it's counterproductive. I would completely argue that it's counterproductive because you have a lot of well-meaning liberals now that are going to see that and be like, "Oh, Joe Biden stands with the one, essentially one out of 2 or 3 Congress women who's taken it a stand at all in the sense he's with her, he's calling her a fighter and all that shit." Meanwhile, he's literally funding the occupation, the apartheid situation going on in her hometown. I just think it's nothing but virtue signaling. It's just like I could pull out a gun and shoot someone in the face and then turn around and say, "Hey guys, how's it going?" Does that make me any better than the person that just turns around and spits on the floor and walks away? Like I don't understand how that has any iota of difference.
I don't think it makes you better. What I think it means is that you're at least posturing as a better person, and you aren't because you're probably also a hypocrite. But at least the posture is significant because strategically that means people can put pressure on you to actually live up to what you say. Now, if you present yourself as being a nice person who's actually thoughtful and wants to moderate the situation in the Middle East, then there's a little bit of political wiggle room for you to try to compel them to hold themselves to that standard, right?
Well,
that's just one.
There's no wiggle room with Trump.
Yeah, Trump is just going to sit there and say
you what he says. Yeah,
we support Israel. That's what we're going to do. Fuck all the rest of you, right? And it's very hard to actually try to wedge him in a different direction with that stance.
No, I hear where you guys are coming from, and part of me agrees. I guess if I was going to disagree at all, I would say that there was a larger amount of pushback to Donald Trump. That people like AOC, people like who is for the first time become a little more vocal about this. But Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, they had a lot more cover. They weren't worried about Nancy Pelosi scolding them for coming out and being too hard on Joe Biden. And they could really rally a group, a wide mass of people to do so. Now, I just feel like Joe Biden is going to have the cover like he is doing something. Like if you go to the front page of The Guardian this morning, it acts as if Joe Biden actually is concerned about what's happening in Israel. It's like Joe Biden orders a de-escalation from Israel in the conflict with Palestine, right? And it's like, oh, okay, so Joe Biden is trying to intervene and help, because I just feel like that's really shallow understanding that most people have. And I don't know. I'm wondering if maybe in the end, I guess we're fucked either way, so we're splitting hairs.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of think too that in that scenario, right, where like AOC or whatever are putting pressure and being outraged at Trump, like that's all that's happening. She just gets to feel outraged. The left gets to get like a little bit of a rush from like pointing out how evil Trump is, but like there's even less chance of anything actually happening other than, leftists get to have their fix to point out how terrible Trump is, as opposed to actually like an opportunity. But I mean, I agree. I mean, the outcome is going to be likely the same, but like at the very least, when someone is, you can at least point someone out to be a hypocrite and like potentially move them. Like somehow that's still a better situation to be in than one with like Trump, where he's just like, fuck you guys, I don't care. And then you could just get stuck in this like cringy oppositional cycle where both sides just get to hate each other and like nothing actually happens. And I feel like that's more toxic than I don't know, some opening.
I don't think it's I don't necessarily think it's fair to call it a rush. And I just think it's about consistency, regardless of who's in charge. I'm going to have the same approach to trying to get what I want, which is, in this example, the liberation of Palestine. So, I think when it comes to the people that were calling out Trump super hardcore, like AOC, I think there was actual value to that beyond, just the rush or beyond just the virtue signal, because it actually educated a lot of people that didn't previously pay attention to the horrors going on in our society, to the fact that there were kids in cages at the border and stuff like that going on. Like these were things that people like are better off knowing what their taxpayer dollars are going towards. And even if it doesn't change anything at the end of the day, I'd rather have a societal awakening as to what our tax dollars go towards and the kind of horrors that we fund overseas in our name with our money on issues like Israel. So, even if it is for naught and even if it doesn't move the needle, I'd much rather have someone like Rashida or AOC out there just 100%. Fucking screaming in front of the White House with a bullhorn about the evils being perpetuated by our political establishment by maintaining the status quo.
But the question is, like, would it be better to have them screaming at a Trump or an AOC, or a Biden? And I guess I think it would be better to have them screaming at a Biden.
I guess that leads into the new question, right? Yeah. Well, yeah. It's that what do we do now, right? Because obviously we have Biden. We're in the situation that we're in. This is where we're at. We need Joe Biden to stop funding the massacre of Palestinians with American tax dollars. I guess what would be your guys' thoughts on the best path forward now?
Well, one of the things I wanted to say just about AOC and Rashida Tlaib, the squad in general, is that as an educator, I see more people inspired to support democratic socialism, however you conceive of it, because of their efforts than virtually any other figure I can think of on the contemporary left. And I think that's sometimes underappreciated by people who are already on the left and just think it's the right thing to do. And that's fine. It's very important to be critical of the squad and not to idolize them or see them as perfect in some way, shape, or form, or as representative of what we need. But in terms of the kind of inspirational effect that they've had on my students, not just in the United States, I should say, but also in Mexico, right? Having somebody who's young, active, is willing to call out Israeli apartheid.
Just like Obama. Yeah, I mean, he was also extremely inspirational.
Exactly. But I mean, the thing is, they're generally prompting a lot of young people to support more radical causes than even somebody like Obama was, right? I mean, if you think about what Obama was advocating for in 2008, it was pretty empty, right? Hope, change, more universal kinds of healthcare, and an end to the war in Iraq. That was better than Bush, but it's not nearly good enough. AOC is advocating for stronger unionization, a very ambitious environmental policy, calls Israel an apartheid state, and is willing to be a lot more insistent that we tackle things like income inequality. And is it enough? No. Does she have a really good set of institutional solutions to this? No. But is she inspiring a lot of 18 to 20 somethings I know to take an interest in a lot of that stuff and maybe go pick up Karl Marx, Noam Chomsky, or whatever? Yes. So I see them overall as being a really positive development for those of us on the left, right?
Yeah,
and
well,
that's
what
one
I
of the
was saying
reasons I
with-
admire what Tlaib did. Tlaib did. Once you called out Biden, was it a little bit, of a posture? Sure, but it was inspiring posture. And I do know that a lot of my students this week were messaging me about it, saying that was pretty cool. Maybe I should look into this a little bit more. So I say good on her.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've always maintained on the show that is the one virtue of having the squad members in Congress. And like I said, with the Bernie thing, regardless of if it doesn't even actually move the needle policy wise, it's still, pursuit that's worth pursuing because it's going to get like young people excited like me, like your students. That being said, I do worry too that now that they've been there for a while, they're going to teach people that, the correct way to change the establishment is to become the establishment, and then incrementalism, how far off are we honestly from them adopting just a purely incrementalist philosophy? That's pretty much what they've been reduced to. So I worry, that they're going to, co-opt some of that, revolutionary or whatever energy, and then also, turn that into, okay, well, we just need to, push Biden left, whatever that means, which none of them are actually doing, except for maybe now Rashida, because she's actually, storming up to him on the tarmac and being like, what the fuck is this? That's about the closest I've seen to really like an active effort to push Biden left.
Probably the most badass thing that anybody's done in this congressional term. I think. And I don't think we should. And I've been critical of the squad on this stream. I do want to make my position on this clear. That was amazing, and that's exactly the kind of shit that I've been beating my fists on the fucking table, being like, we need to do more of that. So
I don't know. AOC playing Among Us with the NDP leader in Canada was pretty badass. I'm not gonna lie. It made me laugh a lot. Fucking my sister messaged me, like, you seen what's happening here? I'm like, I don't know, that's neat.
Yeah, she did it with Hassan too, right?
Yeah, Hassan Piker, right? Yeah,
Hassan Piker. But anyway, I did. Before we wrap, did you guys have any thoughts on the road forward for that? And how we as the left and not just in the America but North America broadly, how do we come together to stop the broader Western support for the occupation of Palestine?
Well, here's where I tend to evoke Karl Marx as an important inspirational figure, right? Because Karl Marx is often held up as the revolutionary leftist par excellence, and that's absolutely correct. He was a revolutionary theorist, both in terms of the content of what he was arguing for and in terms of the means by which we go carry out reform. But it's also worth noting that he didn't see there as being any kind of contrast between revolutionary and radical agitation and the kind of incrementalist policies that are being advanced by the squad. On the one hand, he could sit there and say what we need to do is overcome the limitations of capitalist society as it exists in the 19th century. But he could also say things like we need to support lowering the working day. We need to support reform bills that allow more people to vote. We need to support nascent social democratic parties if they're the only kind of left-wing force in the country, because that's how you actually build momentum for bigger progressive policies down the line. He wasn't a person who would sit there and just didactically say one or the other. He was much more like somebody like Slavoj Žižek today, who would say, do we need radical reform or incrementalism? Yes, please. We want both of them. And that's the approach that I tend to take, right? I can support Tlaib, I can support AOC, I can enjoy them playing Among Us with the NDP leader and helping a lot of young people become attracted to left-wing ideas. And then it's our job, all of us here on this channel, to take them that next step further. That's the way I think of it.
Yeah, and I guess I would also just quickly say something about before I touched on this idea of being a nonpartisan leftist, and I guess I just kind of wanted to push forward the idea that I think it's really important for us to refocus on the outcomes that we want. What kind of a life do we want for people to live? What is our conception of what the point of being a leftist is? What do we concretely want people's life to be? And I feel like when we get stuck a little bit too much behind the signifier of socialism, or one example quickly is this is related to point out what I'm talking about is, people were talking about Trump as being a fascist or whatever. And, I think there is reason to think that, but I think we got too stuck on the label of of calling him a fascist. But I think it would be more helpful to talk about what makes what Trump's specifically doing bad. Talk about the specific things that he's doing that are bad instead of just being fascist. And I think similarly, rather than being we're going to be a socialist, talk about what actually we want that's going to be good. And what's going to be, what do we want politics for? What kind of life, what kind of society do we want to create concretely, as opposed to just hiding behind the label?
Yeah, no, that's so true. That's so true. And I was actually watching this hilarious video that if anyone gets a chance to check out, you definitely should. It's like a Vice, a little mini Vice documentary. They went into super Trump heavy part of the country, and they actually talked to like 20 or so Trumpists that were like sitting at the table, and these people are very ideologically confused. They didn't, they had a lot of contradictory responses when when the host tried to start to tease out of them what their actual ideology is. And on one hand, they were saying that everyone on the left, even mild social democrats, even liberals, we're all communists. Everyone's a communist. But then on the other hand, these people, they fancy themselves populist right, and they were talking about how it's the people versus the elites, and I'm like, isn't that literally like the point of communism? Like the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie? Like, isn't the people versus the elites literally like kind of the theory of communism? Like, how can you, recognize that as the plight, but then, just kind of characterize everyone on the left as a crazy commie without having any sort of reckoning of those two schools of thought. But I think you're certainly right that if we actually do talk about the shared goals and the end goals of this, we could win over a lot of people that may be kind of ideologically confused, that may not really understand what is possible or what the left stands for. Because you're right, there are so many labels thrown around, and everyone is just kind of like, in their own culture war and all this other stuff going on.
Well, it's interesting because I feel like often a lot of leftist infighting too is about the tactic, right? Like, should we be incrementalists, you said, versus, but like, isn't the outcome that we want the same? Like, I don't know, asking that question, I think, is worth something, right? As opposed to just getting a bit too fixated on like
what I worry about that is that people use incrementalism as excuse to not actually pick fights. That they go into Congress and they're like, you know what, it'd be a lot easier for me to just cash in and make $174,000 a year to just go along to get along, and then I'll be like, oh well, I've adopted the approach of incrementalism. Meanwhile, come on, these people could be spending a little bit more time raising a ruckus and actually, calling out issues where they say, calling out the health insurance industry, all this stuff that their own party is complicit in. I mean, AOC was talking about less than a year ago how it's fucking ridiculous that her and Joe Biden have to even share the same party. Yeah. I think it's not that much to ask that she continues that consistency of approach when talking about, corrupted corporate Democrats. But
yeah, and I think you can, even if you compare that to even further back to, her, what was it, her freshman Congress day when she was tweeting about every single thing going down. Oh, this is all the fundraising. Oh, this is this is so ridiculous. And now she's firmly entrenched in playing ball and giving favors out, $5,000 favors to swing state.
And even on Israel Palestine, let's be honest, because she has come out with some better statements lately, but like less than a month ago, we reacted to it. She was asked point blank about it and gave the most mealy-mouthed fucking word salad answer I have ever heard, refusing to condemn what's going on there, completely waffling, speaking out of both sides of her mouth. So, I think that we could hold them to a higher standard. And I certainly think that, people get cozy when they get in power and when they surround themselves with a bunch of other elites that are making that much money of taxpayer funds. But anyway, we really did enjoy the conversation today and really enjoyed kind of going back and forth on some of these strategic differences and different ways of thinking. And we look forward to having you back on. I thought it was an illuminating and really engaging conversation.
Yeah,
I'd love to come back.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much. And we look forward to chatting some more.
Yeah, and also, right before we peace out, do you just want to let everyone know where they can find the plastic pills and the PillPod, and just let everyone know where they can find your stuff?
Yeah, you can find us on YouTube. Like when you search Plastic Pills, you should see both YouTube channels, and like the Plastic Pills podcast. The PillPod is available anywhere you'd get a podcast, any like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everything. So check us out.
Yeah, and I should say also, Victor and I have a new essay collection that's coming out shortly with Palgrave Macmillan on liberalism and socialism, the differences between them, the overlaps. He wrote a really good essay on sortition. I wrote one about different kind of liberal socialists that have existed. Are they weird? Do they have something to say? So people should check that out. It should be released in a couple months. It's a good question.
Yeah, we'll definitely check that out and have you guys back on to chat about it. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, guys.
Take care, guys.
Just wanted to quickly shout out our patrons real quick one more time before we let you all go. But it was a super great conversation, and thanks so much for coming on, Matt and Victor. I thought that was
I love chatting with those guys. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, no. What were you going to say, Zach?
Oh, I was just going to say, it's always good to have people with a little bit of a different opinion, a little bit of a different insight. It's good to push back and challenge yourself and think about all that kind of stuff. So we love really solid engagement here on the Vanguard. Can't wait to have those dudes back on. great comrades, those dudes.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And, obviously we're going to have disagreements with everyone we talk to on this show. They may not, come up. They may not come up in conversation, but we're always going to disagree with people. And when they do come up, we're obviously going to have a conversation about it. There's nothing wrong with that. That's like the best part of this, this job or whatever you want to call it, is working this stuff out. And obviously, it's very easy for everyone to get entrenched in their own ideas and their own bubble or sphere, whatever you want to call it. And it's very necessary to bring on people to challenge our ideas, to, push back a little bit and say like, yo, I think differently about this. But anyway, that's why it was a great conversation. And also just, I really do enjoy their work over at the PillPod.
Oh yeah, and great editing videos. Whoever does that, we were talking about this before the podcast. Whoever edits your guys' videos, fucking jamming.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Some of the top tier content when it comes to like theory and like if you want to learn about like Zizek and Lacan and all that stuff. So those guys are awesome and the work they're doing is great. So huge shout out to coming on. But yeah, that link for the Patreon's in the description if you guys want to join. A lot of cool benefits there, Discord, all that stuff. So yeah, check that out. And we'll be back tomorrow. We got a pretty exciting interview tomorrow. Do you want to make an announcement, Zach, or should we wait?
Let's go ahead and tease that one out, but we will be back as always for our book club later in the evening. We'll be doing another few chapters on Cornel West, Democracy Matters. So be sure to hit the bell below. You can be privy to our super special, super surprise guest. You are not going to want to miss it. Gavin and I are extremely stoked for this conversation. It's one we've been looking forward to for a while rather. But anyway, hit that bell. You're not going to want to fucking miss this. We have a bunch of really great guests coming up. Gavin and I are doing some cool shit over the weekend. So you guys are going to want to make sure that you're subscribed and paying attention and looking out for that shit. But thanks for everybody who was watching, and peace out.
Yeah, peace, guys.